Everyone, welcome to the Working Far From Home panel, where we're going to discuss a little bit about working from home, working for companies also that may not be within your accepted time zone, sort of expectations that are placed on you when you're working from home, and how not to be a doormat, basically. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, and I'll introduce myself, and then if you have any questions, if you could hold those till the end, we will have a Q&A session. But I suspect it may well just dissolve into a nice, friendly conversation, given the number of people that we've got here this morning. Yeah. And thank you so much for actually getting out of bed this morning with the weather and everything and a very long convention. It's much appreciated that you've made it. So to my right, I have...
Hi, my name is Sarah Gulde. I'm from Portland, Oregon. I do bookkeeping consulting. Most of my work with clients is done remotely. I've recently just got my schedule to where I only have to leave my house 2 afternoons every 2 weeks. Ooh. And I'm very excited about this.
And to my actual right, other right.
Hi, I'm Bebo, and I own Bebo Games. I write, I wrote a book, and I do convention photography, and mostly I make YouTube videos and do board game photography out of my home, but I work far from home when I have to do this convention travel stuff, so things can get a little hectic.
It can indeed. And I am Lynne Hardy. I am the Associate Editor for Call of Cthulhu at Chaosium and the line editor for the up-and-coming Rivers of London RPG. And I spent most of last year travelling and working far from home. Yeah. Because conventions are work. Never forget that. So, thank you for joining me. Thank you. So, Sarah, what have your experiences of working from home been?
That's a very broad question.
It is. So, I mean, how did you start working from home?
I started working from home because I started out on my own as a freelancer, and I was finding with a lot of clients I did not need to be doing their work on site. So I ended up working more and more at home, finding it actually is harder than it sounds to keep yourself motivated to work the hours you need to be working to pay your bills. I had to go out and get nicer pajamas so I didn't feel like a slob all day. I have nice pajamas now. I feel like a grown-up. But on the other hand, I love the flexibility of being able to say, you set your own hours, which can be hard, but it's also great. I no longer have to get up at 6 or 7 in the morning. I sleep until 9 every day. I don't take appointments before 11, which means sometimes I work into the evening or I work on weekends, but it's still when I want to work, which is nice.
So you found it a very positive experience overall? I
love it. It's been great for my stress levels. I have anxiety, and it's helped a lot with that. I found a lot when I was working in a 9 to 5 and this was before actually I was diagnosed with anxiety, I would miss a lot of days. I would take a lot of sick days, and I didn't understand why until I got this diagnosis. And now I can be like, okay, these are the ways I need to set up my life to handle the stress so it doesn't boil over, and working at home lets me do that.
Excellent.
Question again?
So how did you get into working from home, and what's your overall experience been? Has it been positive? Has it been challenging? We'll come on to a little bit more about the challenges in a second. But
yeah. Okay, so I started working from home when I was working for a board game distribution company, and that was much more challenging than what working from home is for me now. Now I own my own company, and I just kind of do my own thing, which is great. But again, I find that my failures are the same thing over and over again, which is kind of a problem, which is just that I find the biggest challenge for me is letting little things fall through the cracks. I could be more proactive about making posts on Instagram or Twitter about gaming and little things that would really just help build my brand, that I just put on the back burner and don't prioritize in a way that I wish that I did. Because I'm so busy looking forward at this big project that I've really got to get done, and then I end up getting it done and it's super good, but it doesn't get the traction that I want because of the fact that I haven't been doing this little tiny amounts of work here and there that I need to be doing because I'm not getting paid for it directly, and therefore I haven't prioritized it. Yeah,
and that's an interesting aspect as well, is if you're working for a company who is paying you and they're handling that kind of side of things, that's a very different challenge from being sort of, it's your company that you're trying to grow and advertise, and you're doing everything.
Right, and that can be scary. Initially, I was going to be paying somebody to like help me with it, and they lasted about 2 weeks. I was like, I'm going to call this your toilet job, and I was like, all you need to do is I'll pay you $25 a week, and whenever you're on the toilet, go through Instagram and like some posts for me. They lasted 2 weeks, and they were like, it turns out I don't have the strength to do this. Then I tried to recruit my daughter to do it, and it was a whole mess. There are little things that you have to do as a person that owns your own company that is literally fun for nobody, and it never is going to be fun. And that's something that I struggle with every day of my life.
I started working from home. I was originally trained as a biomedical research scientist. And then I packed that in because I developed anaphylaxis to latex, which is not something you want as a research scientist. It makes things slightly tricky. So I became a lecturer and got sick of college politics. So I ended up working from home because I was desperately overqualified for doing an awful lot of other things. And seriously, if you have a PhD and you apply for anything that isn't sort of research level, people just dispose of your CV because they think you're having a laugh. They will not take you seriously. So it was kind of by default I ended up working at home. I also then developed health issues, which meant it would have been very difficult for me to hold down the lecturing job. So it kind of all worked out in the end. But yes, it is interesting. It does have its own challenges. But we have been joined by Misha.
Hi, how's it going? I, for some reason, had 11:45 on my schedule instead of 11:30 on my schedule.
Would you like to introduce
sure,
yourself?
I'm Misha B.
Your experience of working from home.
Sure, I'm Misha B. I am a freelance game designer now. I worked for many years as a database analyst and computer scientist in the real world.
I'm not sure that exists.
Yeah. And I'm a mom, so my kids got older and it became a lot easier to work freelance stuff, so I had time because they're 9 and 11 and they're at that age where it's like, oh, but mom, can I do this thing after school that's on the other side of town that we have no public transportation really to speak of in the city we live in, but I need to get to it. So that's how I started. And it's worked out so far.
Cool.
I'm also from the other side, I've hired freelancers as part of New Agenda Publishing. We hired about 10 or 11 writers from all over the globe. We had people in India doing a couple of things. We had people in Canada. We had people in Guam. We had there's really no need anymore, at least in game design, at least, to be, oh, you must come into an office and work 9 to 5, and this is what you have to do.
So the main thing I'm hearing from all of you is that there is this degree of flexibility to working from home.
Yes.
That you don't necessarily get if you're working for a company in an office.
No.
Now that has its benefits, but it also has its challenges. And Sarah, you alluded to this in terms of your motivation and getting things done. So do you have tools for dealing with that? Or you just tell yourself off when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and say, no, you must get on with things?
Definitely like tracking my hours and having a weekly goal of hours I have to work. I usually get close. Yeah, so that helped a lot, having a specific office space set up where I work. Still don't get dressed. I work in pajama land. But yeah, that's the big one, keeping on myself about billable hours so I make sure the money's coming in so the bills can get paid.
Mm-hmm.
I find that the best thing that keeps me motivated is obviously deadlines. I don't really have a choice because I work with Kickstarter campaigns, and so there is a launch date and there's always a deadline. Charisse helps me keep motivated and organized, and mostly I'm just like, hey, will you come watch that TV show I don't really like in my office while I work? That way I feel like I'm ignoring something so I can get this done. Which sometimes I just need that distraction, the background noise, because my brain doesn't function as just one thing. I'm just one thing at a time.
Interesting. Misha?
Yeah, I find that I have to put on the calendar that I'm going to work from this time to this time, and so that it's a commitment, because otherwise, yeah, it tends to be, oh, that thing is due in 24 hours, and I have 5,000 words to write. All right, this is going to be fun. And you don't really want to try to get to that stage very often. So yeah, I try to do Just like I have to schedule in, like, all right, I'm going to drop the kids off, and the next thing on my calendar is, okay, I'm going to go work out, and the next thing on my calendar is, all right, from here to here, I'm going to write on this project, and then schedule it in. But it still gives me some flexibility. It's like, all right, the kids are off school today, we can afford to take this day off and go do something else instead. So it's both the flexibility, but you do still have to provide yourself some structure, or else things just can't.
Yeah, that's certainly been my experience as well. I kind of need the structure. I try to do office hours just because obviously I'm working for a company, so that helps to do office hours. But of course my major challenge with Chaosium is we have some people in Australia, there's our little core in England and Europe, so there's only an hour's difference there. Then we have people on the east coast of America and people on the west coast, so that's kind of like 24 hours worth of time zones, which can be quite entertaining, sort of balancing things. So when you're dealing with clients who are out of your time zone, and I appreciate in America there's like, you've got 3 of your own.
4.
You've got 4.
Well, technically, I think there might be 6, because Hawaii is its own time zone, Alaska is occasionally its own time zone, and then you've got the 4 across the continental U.S.
That's just greedy.
Yeah, well, I think only Indiana is left as not doing daylight savings. Arizona is the other, yeah. But
So you have all the time zones.
yeah, we have all the time zones. Very greedy about it.
So what do you do if you are dealing, what are your strategies for dealing with companies that are way out of your time zone? Do you just work extra hours, or do you sort of give yourself time in lieu to cope with that? Misha?
Yeah, I shift a lot. So like when we were working with the couple of people we were working with in India, so that's a 12-hour difference from my East Coast time zone. So it's like, all right, so if you can be there at 7 p.m. and I can be there at 7 a.m., will that work? And so it's a certain amount of shift that you just have to do, and just, all right, well then I won't do it later, I'll do it earlier in the day instead.
Yeah, we used to swap, uncomfortably early hours of the day. I'd be like, okay, I'll do it this day, you do it this day, and we would swap.
Yeah.
Every other one.
I don't have any clients who aren't on the West Coast. I'm lucky. I've got one that's a world traveler, but nothing we do is that urgent that we can't just do it over email or Slack.
Yeah.
So.
That's a nice position to be in.
Yeah.
And in terms of, do you allow yourself time in lieu, so time off effectively if you're working weird, strange hours that would be outside your normal ones?
So I don't really, it's rare that I do like 8 hours in a day. So like normally I'm 9 to like 2-ish is like peak working hours for me, because that's after that I have to go get kids before that. And then I might do some more stuff in the evening after they've gone to bed. That's when I usually do a lot of streaming and a lot of actual play, that kind of thing. And so if it doesn't really fit into that 9 to 2, it's usually, okay, I'm working with somebody on the West Coast and we'll just pick it up in the evening when they're 3 hours earlier and it'll be fine. But I don't necessarily hold myself to, okay, you must only work 8, or because there's rarely a week where I need to work all 40, like a complete 40.
And I'm more productive if I don't work a full 40.
Yeah.
And with kids, like,
Yeah.
there's always something.
It's like,
can I have a friend over on this day? Oh,
Mom,
well,
I need to have 24 cupcakes for tomorrow.
Yep.
It's 8:30 at night.
Mom, I forgot to do all of my reading for the entire week. Oh, cool.
Yeah, awesome.
So what I keep hearing is it's flexibility, but you need to find your comfortable working zone for how that's going to work for you. And just because what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for everybody. And it very much depends on where you're working, what your field is, who you're working with as well. So, I mean, that's the key thing really, isn't it, about working from home and working for companies who are spread all over the place, is being flexible. But I don't know about you, I think one of the key things you have to watch with flexibility is that you're not being treated as a doormat, that you're at everybody's beck and call all hours of the day and night. It's knowing your limits and actually setting those boundaries and sticking with them so that you're not being exploited, which as freelancers, it can be an issue. Companies do tend to expect a lot of you. Have you ever had any really bad experiences? Not naming names, but have you had any really bad experiences with companies where you had to sort of like stick your foot down and go, no, you are trying to take advantage? Sarah?
I actually just fired my largest client because they were doing exactly that. I'm a freelancer. I have a whole bunch of different clients. This one had somehow gotten me to where I was on their site all day, 2 days a week. I was working weekends. I was working evenings to keep them running. And they were not being very respectful about taking up that much of my time. And there finally came a day where I was like sick and I'm like, I can't come in today. And they're like, can you just do this stuff? I'm like at my computer, like shaking and sweating. And I get an email that's like writing me up and asking for a performance plan. And I'm like, I am not your employee. You don't get to ask me that. So here's the plan. You hire someone else to do this job. So that's my experience with it.
Good for you.
I definitely had a situation with a company that I really, 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 really liked, and I was super passionate about their products. And that was the really hard part, was that I loved what I did. But the funny thing is that companies don't really think that like making one social media post a day is a big deal. And I think that that's because a lot of companies seem to think that A, it's not very much work. B, that you can just pull from the assets that they have, which is really not the case if you want any kind of interaction from your audience. And C, that all photography is taken on your phone really easily and quickly and doesn't need editing, and who cares about actual work. Right, and so I was, doing 1 to 2 posts on each of their channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else, every single day.
That's a lot of content.
And I was being paid $500 a month.
Oh.
And I was not doing weekends, and they got upset with me for not doing weekends. And I was like, okay, then you should let me go.
Yeah.
Not so much, not quite true. Before, I did have, when I was working as a database analyst, we had this on-call pager. And at one point, everybody who could take an on-call pager was no longer with the company except for me. So I had it for about 2 full years, where it was like, oh, technically I'm supposed to answer this at 24/7, all the hours of the day and night. And we had our customers pretty well trained that if it wasn't an actual emergency and you called me at midnight, you might get yelled at. And that was okay, because it was like, no, this is not an emergency. It can wait till normal business hours when there are more people who can handle this. But there are RPG companies who will definitely underpay you for the amount of work they want you to do. I had a friend who was hired at like 3 or 4 cents a word, but they wanted them to do research and be thoughtful, but they weren't paying them for like the time that they had to put in for research and everything else to do this thing that they wanted to do respectfully. So there are some contracts that do take advantage of people that way. It's like, yes, you're paid for the amount of words you're writing, but that doesn't encompass also the research and everything else you need to do to get those words on the page.
If you can hold any questions to the end, please, Janet.
So I had my own business for 4 years, and I'm coming back to that field. But I learned very early on that it's important to say these words. That's not in the scope of our original agreement. Let me get you a program.
That works sometimes if you haven't already agreed to, yeah.
An agreement, and it's always time bound and work bound and hours bound, and then anything that they want extra, you say that's not in the scope of our.
I disagree. Unfortunately, with freelancing and especially with writing, you're not doing billable hours. You're doing billable words. So that is not a thing that you can just say. That's great. Okay, that might have worked for you.
It does depend on the scope of the project as well. I mean, sometimes you can, but as you say, normally it's a per word thing. But one thing I would say if you are a freelancer is never start any project until you have a contract.
Yes.
I mean that.
Yeah. Don't write word one.
When you're first starting and you're really enthusiastic and it's something you really want to do, that kind of falls through the cracks. But don't. Know your worth. Make sure that you have that protection in place, because otherwise you are unfortunately potentially leaving yourself open to exploitation, which you want to avoid, because if you get a reputation that people can do that to you, then more people will try to do that to you, and it's harder to claw it back from that point.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say another problem I tend to have with clients is they think they can tell me my schedule, so they'll contact me. I've had a client email me on Saturday morning and be like, yeah, that huge project, I'm going to need it done by Tuesday. And I'm like, oh, that's cute. You should have told me that 3 weeks ago then.
Yeah.
And have to explain to them, okay, well, here's how it works. I usually have a queue of 2 to 3 weeks of work, so if you need something done, you have to give me more notice. And, I have to do that the first time they do this. Otherwise, it does set up the expectation that I'm going to drop everything for them all the time.
Yeah.
Which I will if a client has an actual emergency and they need some, like I had one whose PayPal store got shut down right away and PayPal needed some reports before they would open it back up. And it's like, okay, for you, I will drop everything and get this done. But for you who just did not bother to inform you needed this done, no.
Yeah, yeah. There was a company that I'd done a huge amount of work for, and they said, oh yes, we want you to work for us full time. We'll give you £100 a month to man our forums. And it was like, no.
No.
Just no.
I'm sorry,
You don't want to let me loose in your forum because idiots, and I will tell them they are idiots, which is really not going to do your company brand a great deal of good. Really, just that, no. So
I don't think £100 a day would be enough for me to manage forums.
Right, yeah,
Oh.
precisely. It's like, yes, and I have a very low tolerance for idiots
Yeah,
on forums,
yeah.
so it would have been an absolute disaster. Kind of part of me was tempted to see how long I could have lasted before they fired me, but I really didn't want the aggro running up to being fired.
Probably would have not made £100.
Yeah, quite probably not. I wouldn't have lasted a month, I can guarantee that. So, I think, do any of you have any, the one key thing you'd wish you'd known before you started working from home? Sarah, if we start with you.
I would have taken more time while I was still doing an office job to build up my work, because I did end up having help from my family when I was starting out and I didn't have enough clients. That's happily not a problem anymore, but I think if I'd stayed longer at a job where I had health insurance, that probably would have been a smarter way to get started, and just slowly built things up on evenings and weekends to where I could break away.
If you're doing convention travel, give yourself a day before and a day after.
Yes.
Seriously, I always don't plan for that, and I recently did, and it changed my life. So
next time I'm coming, please remind me of that, because I am terrible for going, I will give myself a day and then just not doing it. And you're right, you really do need it, don't you?
yes, you need it. You need to give yourself a day of just video games, Netflix, pass out, sleep whenever you want.
Get yourself back on your time zone again.
Oh my gosh, it took me 3 weeks to get back on my time zone from a convention recently, and it was a nightmare.
I'd say be kinder to yourself. The world is not going to end if you fail once or twice. If you fail 20 times, the world probably still isn't going to end. So just, you're going to make mistakes, accept that you're going to make mistakes, and just try not to make the same mistake twice. But yeah, just be gentle about it. You're going to make some stupid choices, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, forgive yourself. That's all very good advice. You've pretty much covered all the ones I was going to mention, so thank you. We've got half an hour. Shall we do questions?
Yeah.
Right. Anybody got any questions? Janet?
I have a medical condition that makes my ability to work very, very low. I don't know if I can work on any particular day. So how do you deal with that when negotiating deadlines and, milestone reports, so that you can give yourself a little slack in case there are 2 or 3 days in the interval that you can't work?
So be like Scotty, and if it's going to take you 6 hours to make the repair, tell the captain it's going to take you 12 hours.
Yeah.
Give yourself some time.
Yeah. What is it? Underestimate and other way around. Overestimate and deliver. It's easier to overestimate how long it's going to take, and then surprise them happily when you're done faster. Yes.
Yeah.
So set the bar higher than you think it'll take you, and that'll give you a little bit of padding.
Yeah, and be realistic. Use the Scotty principle. I wholeheartedly approve of that. And if you do have problems, if your deadline is looming and you know you're not going to make it, talk to people. Don't vanish. Yeah. I mean, having been on both sides of this as a freelance writer and as a line editor, it's, you know, as long as you are honest with people and you let them know, most companies will work with you to make sure that, you know, you're going to be fine. And as long as they know that the work is coming in, it's just going to be a little bit delayed. They can then hopefully reshuffle things to help you. What they're going to be less willing to do is if you don't bother telling them, you disappear, you stop answering their emails, you just pretend they don't exist and that there isn't a problem, then that makes them, that upsets their pipeline and causes them issues, but it also means that they're going to be way less willing to work with you in future and cut you any slack in future because they just don't know where they stand with you. And some smaller games companies can't afford to do that. Bigger ones might be able to because they've got a little bit more leeway, because they've got more in process that they can shuffle around. But it's not really a risk that you can take because you'll get yourself a bad reputation and people just won't be willing to offer you that sort of buffer zone if you need it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a point where, like, you know, the deadline is in 2 days and you know you have like 3 days more worth of work, just tell them. I mean, exactly what you said. You know, if you let them know, hey, I'm at this phase, but I'm having a little bit of a health crisis, most people are going to be, most humans who are actually good humans will say, yes, I understand that. Your health is important. And if they aren't good humans, get the work done and then never work for that company again.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah, I give them a future date. Recently, I had a fridge delivery emergency where these people said they were delivering my fridge at noon one day. They didn't actually show up until 3 o'clock the next day after rescheduling twice. And then when they got there, it didn't fit in the house. So they ate up my like entire work day and a half. And I was so frustrated, and somebody was like, hey, did that video go live? And I had to message them and go, okay, so here's my fridge emergency. And just kind of explain what's going on. And I said, however, here's a screenshot of the video. It's scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I just wanted to have it at an ideal hour. That way it gained the most visibility, which was actually super true. And still delivered on the product. It was just like a day and a half late. And everybody was happy because it was a Kickstarter campaign. It worked out for them.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a good way to judge whether a company is a company that you want to keep working for, is their reaction to you going, I have a problem, can I have a little bit of leeway, please? And if they're not going to be reasonable about it, as Misha says, finish that project and then never darken their doors again because they don't deserve you. And always remember that you have a value. Do not underestimate that value. And as various people said, be kind to yourself, appreciate yourself, and know that your contribution is valuable, and don't undersell it.
Do any of you see yourself ever working in the real world again after you have the experience of working from home?
Never. Never. Like, I don't have any illusions about retiring or about Social Security existing when it's time for me to retire, so my plan is just to cut back to 10 hours a week when I get old. But I love what I do, and I love what I do, and I like the schedule, and I like that I get to choose who I work with, so I don't think I could go back at this point.
I think I could. I think I'm gonna have to eventually. What I'm doing right now, like, is great, and I love it. But I always kind of saw it as something that I'm taking a couple years off to build, and then I will keep it running in the future. But it's not something that I can afford to like sustain long term. Even though I love what I do, and that is what it is. I'll build something. I'll keep it going. I will just do less of it in the future. And I hope eventually to have like a full-time photography gig with some other thing. But I could definitely see myself doing more, leaning more photography and less YouTube because, oh boy.
Yeah.
It's so much work.
Misha?
I don't know if I would go back to a traditional office job. I have discovered, I do know about myself that I am completely horrible at not doing anything. Like, doing nothing is very hard for me. So I don't know if it would be a traditional, like, 9-to-5 office job kind of thing, but I don't see myself not doing anything.
Because of the situation I was in, even though, you know, at the moment, there is technically, we have universal healthcare in Britain and state pensions, because of being a research scientist, being a lecturer, I really don't have much of a pension plan because I wasn't allowed to have a personal pension when I was a PhD student. Because my first postdoc was in Canada, I wasn't allowed to take out a personal pension plan because I wasn't in the country. So that was 5 years of not paying into a state pension. I am under no illusions that I will never retire because I won't have, I don't have, I've got bits here and there, but nothing that is ever going to be enough, really. I've only been able to do what I've done for as long as I've been able to do it because my partner has a good job, and you'll be surprised how many people who do work from home as freelancers, the only reason they can do it is because their partner has a stable job that's providing healthcare, that, you know, the ability to pay bills and things. So it realistically, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's 8 years now since I left the college, and it took that long to get a job where I'm now getting a monthly salary again, which is wonderful. And I kind of don't know what to do with it because I've been managing without one, you know. Which is nice. It means I can pay for more wonderful trips to things like this, you know. It's great. But you do have to be realistic about, as you're saying, the ability to pay bills. So yes, it's wonderful to be able to do freelancing, working from home, but it may not be something that you can always do. You may have to dip in and out. And until my health issues resolve, which hopefully at some point they will, my ability to go back into a normal job is seriously limited. And I don't know many normal employers who would put up with the amount of time I would necessarily need to take to deal with those health issues. So working from home for me, it was something I'd kind of run out of normal jobs to do with the qualifications I had, but also going back would be very, very tricky. Janet?
How do you price your services? When I was doing business before, I abruptly doubled my price because I had more work than I could do. And I thought this would drive people away, and instead I got more clients, probably twice as many inquiries per quarter. So how do you know what's the right price point? Because I want to earn as much as I realistically can, but I also want to limit my projects and not say yes to too many.
Misha?
I have an odd metric. I find the highest priced white dude in the industry that is doing the thing I want to do, and I add $1.
I think that's a good idea. Nobody buys cheaper.
Eh.
You know, it costs 5 cents to manufacture. Nobody wants to have 5 cents per pound.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I can. I mean, I do occasionally take some passion projects that are paid less, but yeah, it's a matter of find out what is. And the RPG industry is severely underpaid compared to other industries.
Yeah.
Like writers for RPGs, 3 cents a word from some of the biggest company, 5 cents a word is fairly standard. If you're getting 10, 12 cents a word, you're doing good. Whereas if you're a writer in sci-fi, or if you're a writer for magazines, you're like looking at 20, 30, 50 cents a word. So part of it is, there is a growing movement among writers to try to start pushing that ceiling up towards more equitable pay rates. But yeah, there's a certain amount of, if I'm going to be working for, like, and I do a lot of sensitivity editing too. So it's like, yeah, if you're pretty much paying me to make sure you're not being an asshat, and that's usually what they're paying me for, I do charge cishet white guys a little more than I charge black and brown people who are starting out. You know, there is a bit of a sliding scale. I want them to succeed. I want to make sure that, you know, if my name is going on it, it's as best as it can be. But yeah, there's a little bit of a sliding scale sometimes.
Yeah, and one of the issues we have in the industry, and I mean in a lot of industries, is that pay isn't necessarily something people feel comfortable talking about, so companies have been able to get away with exploiting people because you don't really know what people are being paid. I mean, one of the reasons I quit the college was because I found out I was being paid £4,000 a year less for effectively running 2 courses than a male lecturer who had less experience, who was just lecturing. And when I challenged the college, they went, well, you signed the contract. It's like, yes, because you told me I was being paid commensurately with everybody else doing the job I was doing. So, you know, it's getting better, as you say. It is getting better.
Yeah, people are being more open about it, and so it's being discussed more. So you can find, like, I know Jason Petra did a survey of a bunch of, he did editors, he did writers, and he published those results. This is what people are saying they're making. So you could look and see across the industry, this is what people are making, and then you could price yourself commensurately.
Bebo, you have a...
Yeah, so another big thing is like talk to people about it who are willing to talk about it. Yeah.
American Writers and Artists, or Artists and Writers, and there's also a Freelancers Union website that has pricing.
Yeah. Yeah, and those numbers are going to be different than RPG, just so you know. Yeah.
I found out recently from another woman who worked at my competitor when I was working at a distribution company, and she told me how much money she was making. It was literally 1/8 of what I was making. And I had to be like,
oh, honey.
You have to fight back. And I was like, you fight for a new contract. And I was like so mad for her. And so she's been talking to me for like weeks about it. And I was just like, I was so upset for her. I didn't know that I could like feel so much rage for somebody, because I was just like, they're completely like robbing you of what your labor's worth.
And the fact that, so, you know, 100 years after alleged emancipation, we are still fighting this fight. And was it, I don't know if you've seen the one that people have mentioned, is it in Little Women, where Joe gets paid $100 for a story, and it's kind of like, we're still getting paid $100 for a story. This is really not good.
No.
Sarah, do you have?
Yeah, so my experience with pricing myself was that I was working my last office job. I would do the day-to-day bookkeeping, and then there was a consultant who would come in once a month and like close things up. And then after she left, I would fix all her mistakes. And like, oh, wait a minute, she makes twice an hour what I do. What am I doing here? So I left and decided I was going to charge $10 more an hour than she was charging, because I was better at the job than she was.
And again, knowing your worth.
Yeah.
And that can be a real tricky thing to find. It really can. So this gentleman at the back has a question, and then we'll come to...
So, hi. Second of all, you're talking about negotiating pay and everything. This is something that's been on my mind for a while. I don't want to say where I work somewhere in the video game industry where the most important people in our company, not me, I'm objectively very expendable, the most important people in our company are making significantly less than me. And we're trying to figure out how to negotiate that, like how to navigate that. Is there like, do you have any advice, or do you know where I go for resources on how to discuss this or how to approach this problem? Because you're discussing like pay and differences, and like Bebo, you were talking about your friend that's making less. Like, how would one go about that? Or is this too far off topic from where we are right now? Because I can just discuss it after the panel or something.
And this is my husband works in a fairly, and what I've told him and told multiple people is, it never hurts to look for another job. If nothing else, you have an offer in hand that you can walk into your current job with and negotiate with for more.
Yep. And what we also need to do is normalise talking about what people are getting for the work that they're doing.
Yeah. Any employer who tells you you're not allowed to talk about your salary is lying.
It's totally illegal.
It's completely legal, and it is illegal for them to tell you not to. So, be open.
And people not talking about their salaries usually hurts women and people of color.
That's what's going on in my office, and I'm like,
Yeah. Dave?
Just one thing to add to the statement of it never hurts to look for another job. I knew someone in tech who was very happy in their job, and they interviewed for a new job each and every year. Not because they had any intent of taking it, but because interviewing for a job is a skill in and of itself.
Yes.
And if you are not practicing it, when the time comes where you have to interview for a new job, you may not do it very well.
Yeah. the caveat to taking an offer is be fully prepared to take that other offer if your current company says, yeah, we're not going to match it.
I would
Yeah.
add the caveat that you have to be very careful when you do that because you've just told them you're a leave threat, and so they may arrange your departure at a time of their maximal convenience.
Yeah.
I have done exactly what you said.
Yeah.
But there's a risk.
Yeah.
I actually was once, I got another job offer. I was offered a promotion to stay, so I turned down the other offer, and then they rescinded the promotion offer. In related news, if anyone needs a good employment lawyer, I can recommend one.
Right?
Wow. Going back to my college story, they thought I was using putting my notice in as a gambit to increase my pay to what they should have been paying me. And it was like, no, because this has been going, by that point, it had been going on for over a year of them telling me to get lost. It's like, no, you had that chance a year ago. I'm serious, I'm going. And it was like, but you have nothing to go to. And it's like, I'm giving myself that time to develop my freelance career because you don't deserve me. You had that opportunity. Goodbye.
Yeah, I did notice my day job when I put in my notice. They were like, can we convince you to stay a little longer?
Yeah, I definitely had that experience. I worked for an insurance company, and they watched me struggle financially, and they knew I was struggling financially. I expressed that to them very clearly, and then I got a job offer from a game company, and I said, "This is what they're willing to pay me," and the insurance company was like, "Okay, fine, we'll double your pay if you stay," and I was like, "You're lucky I don't light your whole place on fire."
Yeah.
I'm leaving. I was very, very upset because I was like, yeah, how are you going to sit there and watch a single mom struggle at 21 years old and then not give me the pay that I am?
So how far are you going to backdate that doubling of my pay?
Right?
Right. I mean, at that point, I was just like, well, I'll just never work with you again.
Yeah. And you do get to that point, which is the saddest thing. Do we have, oh, you had a question at the front here.
So one of the things that I'm finding, I work from home myself, but it's, as the economy becomes more global, it's kind of a race to the bottom. So in our industry, which is like web, we're doing web and software primarily for state government. So a little bit different, but I'm also doing game related stuff. But in that, we kind of lost out of the private market because the work that we were doing now we're competing against $350. State government is probably a bit more stable just because it's like our information needs to be secure, people internal. But I'm also seeing that in the game industry where it's like, well, we could go outside of the US. Have you felt that pressure or ways to address that or working for chaos and see kind of differences? If you're allowed,
I haven't, but then I've had to work hard to establish myself as someone who is reliable, who will do the job, who can get the job done. So, I know my worth, and people realise that if they're paying me, then that they are going to get good stuff, hopefully, that they've asked for what they're paying me. But yeah, that is always something, the fact that there's, but this again comes back to making sure that people know what everybody else is getting paid, encouraging new freelancers not to undercut other people, because you're just perpetuating that cycle at that point, and you're making it hard for everybody. If you're doing stuff for free, going in at the cheapest rate, you're not helping yourself, you're not helping anybody else, and as Sarah said, you are predominantly hurting women and people of colour, because we're already at the lower end of the pay scale, and mediocre white guys will get employed at a higher rate for producing mediocre stuff that people who are capable of producing way better, more interesting stuff, won't get hired at that rate just because companies are used to them not having to pay them that rate. So thankfully I haven't, because I've thought, and I'm quite reasonably belligerent at times about this sort of thing. But yeah, it's something that we all do have to work together to make sure it isn't perpetuated and we can break that cycle so that it doesn't happen. Does anyone have something to add about?
I see it, so I'm more RPGs, tabletop, and LARPs. I see that being an issue more in the art of the thing than of the writing. Because usually even the writers globally are still if you're a company, you can't pay a writer in one place this amount and in a different place this amount, because that looks a little weird, but you can offshore all of your art to some place where the standard of living is lower and get it for cheaper. But it's harder to do with the writing. So I see it, but I want to say it's less of a problem, at least in tabletop. Video games, I'm pretty sure it is the opposite, where it is easier to offshore the coding and everything else. But yeah, I don't know how. There's little you can do from the getting hired standpoint. It's more encouraging the companies that are doing the hiring to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think my experience is very different from what you're talking about, because I tend to work with small local businesses and nonprofits who are either going to want to work with someone face-to-face, or they've had a bad experience with a cheaper bookkeeper. Because I'll tell people when they're going to hire me, you can hire someone for a lot cheaper than me, but it's going to take them 3 times as long to do the job, and you're going to have to hire someone at my rate to come back and fix their mistakes later. So I'm able to market myself more as I'm more of a higher end product than the cheaper bookkeeper, and that's why you want to hire me. But again, it's very different when you're having to market yourself to these huge corporations. Totally different story.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions? We've probably got time for maybe 1, 2 more. Janet?
How do you know what companies can pay you what you want to ask so that you can target them?
Again, this is part of this culture of talking about what companies are paying so that you know. I mean, approach a company, talk to them, find out what their pay scales are, find out whether that's something that you can reasonably exist on.
Ask them what their budget is for the project instead of giving them a rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Negotiate. If they come in low, they may just be trying to take the mickey. You may be able to negotiate a bit more if you have a track record as well. As you say, ask about the budget.
Also ask who else they're working with.
Yeah.
And then talk to those people offline. It's like, oh, I know so-and-so is also going to be involved in this project. Hey, Bob, how much are you making on this one?
Yeah.
Before you sign the contract.
Dave?
And a comment that I said is, be very leery in either freelance or full-time. Any role that either wants it to be uncredited or an industry which is a habit of uncrediting or undercrediting. It's been 15 years since the IGDA tried to address credit issues in video games, and it's still the case that if you leave the day before they cut the credits, they'll probably cut your name. And any place that won't let you talk at conferences, because you, in any role, build your personal brand. It's more important than the company you work for, and
Yeah, because the job for life no longer really exists. You are going to work for a lot of companies in your career as a freelancer, and as Dave says, it's personal brand. You have to always be thinking about that as a freelancer, because you are your own best commodity. That's what you're selling to companies.
It's not just a freelancer. I mentioned to my boss at one point that I was going to be taking an approach in a meeting. I just wanted to give him a heads up, and this is inside of a large corporation. He said, you own your brand. If this is a thing you want to stake out, I'm not going to stop you.
Yeah, which isn't to say there aren't going to be sometimes it's like, all right, you can't talk about it for what you're doing for X amount of time.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's a different thing.
Yeah,
but not being able to talk about it at all is a little hinky. And I'm like, why wouldn't you want me to hype your thing?
Do we have time to talk about imposter syndrome at all? Because that was a huge thing for me as a freelancer.
We've probably got about 5 minutes, so yes, go for it.
I was just saying, like, probably the first 3 or 4 years I was freelancing, I had massive imposter syndrome.
Still do.
And I was sure everything was going to fall apart. And it took a long time. It took other people, like, validating me, which, you shouldn't need external validation, but it's a big deal. It took other people recommending me before I finally got over it and had self-confidence, and that has helped a lot.
Yeah, I still do. It's a thing. I do have, it's probably not the healthiest coping mechanism. I have an alternate persona that often deals with things that I don't feel like dealing with. And it works better, so.
Mine comes in waves. Sometimes I'm like, I'm the best photographer ever. And then the next day I'm like,
I suck.
what's a camera and how do you make it work?
Yeah, the same. And I'm finding actually it's sometimes it gets worse as I'm getting older, which is ridiculous really, because you'd think I should know what I'm capable of doing these days, but every now and again it's like, oh my god, why am I doing this? Can I do this? And then various people will go, oh, for heaven's sake, woman, look at what you've done, you can do this. But you're right, it does. You do have those days when, you know, it's just not quite going the way you want, and you think, oh, maybe I can't. And then hopefully you get past that, either with help or because you give yourself a stern talking to, or some time to just go away and do something else and give your brain time to unwind.
Or eat a tub of ice cream.
Eat it.
Yay.
Yeah. Large box of Hershey Kisses.
Yeah. Final question, yes?
Yeah, so in relation to that, how do you divvy up your time? Because you can work the job, or you can promote, or you can look for the new job. So as a freelancer, how do you manage those different
Misha,
It varies from week to week. So it's like, what do I have on my plate? Like right now, I'm working on finishing up a game, so I'm still doing the promotion of that one. I'm working on a LARP, and we're getting ready to start kickstarting that one. I'm working 4 writing gigs, so it's just like from week to week, from day to day really, it's gonna change what I'm gonna be doing that day. It's like, okay, like Tuesdays and Fridays, I'm gonna, you know, try to hype this. Monday and Wednesday for the next couple of weeks, we're gonna do this, and it's kind of just keeping the balls in the air, juggling.
Yep. Bebo?
That's exactly how I would describe it. I just go with every morning I have like this little journal. I write down the things I need to do. I bring over the things that I didn't finish yesterday. I put them at the top of the list. Then I ignore them and skip down to number 3 because that's the one I want to do. You know, it's juggling.
Yeah, again, to reiterate that, yes, pretty much. Sometimes priorities change, so my plan for the week may have to alter because something's happened. It may be that something's come in late, so we have to move that back, or something suddenly shot up because it needs doing, because there's a deadline we've all forgotten about, and it's going to be hitting here sooner than we thought. But yes, it's usually a day-to-day assessment of where do I need to, you know, what needs to come first, what do I need to do now. Like I said, I do, just for my own mental health, try to do 9 to 5. If I'm working evenings, I will give myself a little bit of time off, because I run demo games at places at weekends and give workshops at friendly local board game cafes and shops and things. I try to make sure that if I'm doing evening work, then I will take some time off the next day to just allow for that. So you're not working all the hours that God sends, because it's very easy to fall into that, and it's not good for you.
That's actually the hardest thing about working from home is, bringing your working environment into your home is hard in that, okay, now there's no clear demarcation anymore. So set that demarcation up. It's like, when I do my writing, it is in this room.
Yeah.
When I'm not writing, I am not in that room.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, if you're trying to do your writing in the same place where you watch your TV, now you're associating watching the place where you watch TV and relax with working, and that stress brain will kick in.
I have ADHD, so I function completely the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have to have many spaces where I can work. And so I have a laptop, and then I have a computer in my bedroom, and I have a computer in my office, and I do certain projects in different rooms. So if I'm writing, I'm gonna write in the most comfortable place in the house, wherever I feel like that is that day. So like, oh, I have a candle that I really like in this room, so I'm gonna light that candle, and I'm gonna grab my laptop, and I'm gonna go there, and I'm gonna be able to focus on this thing. But then I know that when I have to really buckle down and do my photography and YouTube stuff, I have to go to the studio, and it allows me to, I'm very forgetful, and so if I like walk through a door frame, it's just gonna go out of my mind. But sometimes, if I can program my brain right, if I walk into a room that I know I'm needing to do a certain thing on, I'll switch into the mentality of, okay, now it's go time for this thing.
I actually find my most productive place is Panera.
Yeah, and like you have bad health days, and so I have to have some flexibility on, you know, where I'm working from.
Sarah?
My whole life runs on Trello. If you're not familiar with it, it's an organization website. It's free, it's fantastic. And then each day I can put in all the things I need to get done around the house, but also put in, okay, this, I call it my work sprint for today. What client am I really focusing on because I need to get their project done, or multiple clients for that day. So that's how everything happens.
That's awesome.
Right. That's pretty much bang on, I think. So thank you all very much for coming. If you would care to thank my lovely panelists here for their time and advice. Thank you, and I hope everybody's having a really good convention.
Can we get the information on how to stay in touch with all of those?
Oh yes, good point. Yes, does anybody have last words before we all run away?
Sure. So professionally, I'm Sarah Gulde Accounting. I have a website. I'm on Facebook. Also, just for fun, I have a fanzine called Star Trek Quarterly, and I look for people to submit about anything they're excited about Star Trek, art, articles, anything, and that's also on Facebook.
I'm Black Girl Gameworks. BG Gameworks on Twitter is probably the easiest place to find me. I'm kind of vocal there, so.
I'm Bold Bebo, BOLDBEBO on Twitter, or Bebold Games everywhere else on the internet. Yeah, you can find me all over the internet. That's what I do.
And I am at Cogs and Cakes on Twitter. Is the easiest one to find me at.